Committee, Sandag Transportation Committee meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. And if we get the flag raised on the screen there, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And then you'll go ahead and confirm again that we do have the quorum there, Francesca?
Yes, Vice Chair, we do.
Awesome. I'd like to remind members and the public on our process for both member and public comments. The primary members will be using their cameras and will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question. If for some reason the chair or Francesca does not recognize you, feel free to open your mic and remind us that you'd have something to say, and then I'll recognize you. I'll ask our legal counsel to provide a quick reminder on how public comments will work. Please, Amberlynn or John, whoever's in charge of that part.
Thank you, Vice Chair. This is Amberlynn. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, the public may provide live comments during today's meeting. You can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that's provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. When public comments are called for on an item, please click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar, which is located on the top right of the screen. The clerk will then call on you by the name that you have provided. If you're participating by telephone, please press *9 on your telephone, which will raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak. The clerk will then call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Amberlynn. And before we get started, I want to welcome some new members. County Supervisors Nora Vargas and Tara Lawson-Remer, also Joel Anderson, and the City of San Diego Council Member, both Raul Campanillo and, of course, Vivian Moreno, who we know from other parts of Sandag. Welcome. And thank you, Supervisor Vargas and Councilmember Campillo, for joining us today. In light of a long agenda, and I'm going to go ahead and ask that you guys, if you have comments, make them at another time, but we know that you have a lot of interest in transportation. That's why you chose this committee or were appointed to it, and we look forward to working with you on it. It is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to planning for the region's transportation needs. Item number 1, the Transportation Committee is asked to review and approve the minutes from the December 15th, 2020 meeting. Are there any comments or minute changes from anybody on the committee for the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Well, being none, we'll take Admiral Bonelli's motion to approve. I'll need a second, please.
Second by Edson.
Thank you, Jewel. Appreciate that. So motion and a second. And would Francesca, you go ahead and take us through the voting.
Thank you, Vice Chair. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Joanna Schiavone.
Schiavone, yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
I abstain as I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, I'm not sure that Supervisors Vargas or Lawson-Remer are with us this morning, so I'm going to call in Supervisor Anderson.
I apologize. I still can push my buttons. I'm here in attending.
Thank you. And Supervisor Anderson, can you give me your vote, please?
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Mayor Sotelo Solis, are you on?
I am, and good morning. Aye.
Thank you very much. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. North County Transit District is absent this morning. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Bonelli.
Bonelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Vice Chair Sankey.
Sankey, aye.
Thank you very much. And that does pass with 1 abstention and 9 yeses.
All right, thanks, Francesca, very much. Up next is item 2, public comments, communications, and member comments. Public comments first. I'll ask members of the public who wish to offer a public comment. And remember, this is not related to a matter on today's agenda. Raise your hand at this time or make yourself otherwise available to Francesca to call on you. We'll call that seeing none. Francesca, am I correct?
I apologize, Vice Chair, I missed a hand. B. Mittermiller would like to speak.
Okay, B, go ahead and join us for 3 minutes and share your thoughts.
Okay, hi, thank you very much. Good morning and Happy New Year. My name is B. Mittermiller, of course, and I'm the Transportation Chair at San Diego 350. Just as a New Year sort of reset, I want to remind the committee of the priorities of San Diego 350. And I'll start by just giving a fact. The most recent greenhouse gas emission inventory report for the city of San Diego was in 2017, and it found that on-road transportation accounted for 53% of greenhouse gas emissions. So with that in mind, I urge this committee and everyone at Sandag to renew efforts to improve data collection and modeling to support planning that does the best possible job in reducing car and truck vehicle miles traveled and promotes strategies that will result in true progress in the county's air quality. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, B. Appreciate hearing from you. Any other comments? Right about here is where I say I miss Clive. So. Okay, we'll talk. Well, that's an end to public comment. And any members that are on the committee or alternates that are attending that would like to have a comment, please raise your hand or make us aware that you have something to say. Francesca, is that it?
Vice Chair Ann Fox has her hand raised.
Anne, please join us.
Hi, good morning, Vice Chair. I just wanted to make an announcement regarding the State Route 67. Caltrans is in the early stages of planning and are scoping our operational improvements for the 67 this is between Mapleview Street in Lakeside and Highland Valley Dye Road in Ramona. So this is the State Route 67 improvement project that we've previously brought to this committee and provided information on. We will be hosting a virtual public scoping meeting on Wednesday, January 27th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And we also began a 30-day public comment period as of yesterday, January 14th. So this scoping process and the virtual scoping meeting are opportunities to help shape this project. The meeting will include presentations on the project details, the upcoming environmental study, and those in the virtual attendance will also have time to ask the project staff questions throughout the presentation. I'd also like to acknowledge the awful week Ramona has had with the multiple vehicle crashes resulting in the loss of 4 lives. And we understand the urgency the community must feel in getting these road improvements out to our more rural corridors. So thank you for letting me share that.
Of course, Anne, it's a tremendously important issue. Dan and everybody who's worked for years on this issue has to be happy with the direction things have gone so far, but maybe troubled by the speed at which government can get things done. And I've got a little comment on that as well. Any other committee comments?
Yes, Chair Sankey, this is Joanna Schiavone from the airport.
Hey, Joanna, welcome. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I don't know if
or the screen, I guess.
The virtual floor. I just wanted to say thank you. This will be my last transportation committee meeting because of the cycle at the airport. I will be stepping up to the board, but I will miss all of you colleagues here at the Transportation Committee, and I've enjoyed my service and wanted to thank you all. So I didn't know if this was the right time to do that, but I'm here for today through the meeting, and then I will look forward to continuing to work with you all on big things ahead.
It's a perfect time for you to comment, and this organization partnering with the airport for tremendously important infrastructure improvements in it going decade are probably going to really make a difference. And I look forward to your work continuing with Sandag. Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? All right, I'm going to, Joe, is that it there, Francesca?
Yes, I don't see any other hands.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm going to take a minute here to share a tragedy that happened Wednesday in Coronado. A close friend of mine in what passes for our political world here in Coronado had her husband, Andrew, step off the edge of the Coronado Bridge on Wednesday and kill himself. He joins, sadly, the 12 to 15 people annually who make that sorrowful decision that may take away their pain, but only inflict pain around them, family members, friends. Andrew was a father. Andrew was a husband, and we have worked diligently and quietly behind the scenes to get a barrier going. We've moved a long way from, sorry, you don't get a barrier because there's no sidewalk on the bridge, to actual studies taking place. And while if the ramp on the 905 takes an extra 6 months or a year to get done, just like we're talking about on the 67, the barrier on the bridge, the longer it goes unattended to, the more tragedies, sadly, the community has to deal with. So I have been in contact with Todd Gloria on this issue since his time as a council member. I've reached out to Vivian Moreno, and I have also tried to broaden the reach of the issue, and that's why I'm speaking to you today. I would urge you, if you hear at a committee meeting of an agenda item on this, you be supportive of it. I would urge you in a community of your own jurisdiction to advocate for it. It is a necessary infrastructure improvement that will, unlike many that we're not sure how many lives will be saved, but time might be better spent on the roads. This is one that will actually save lives. And so as this issue goes forward, I want to thank especially Caltrans, because they're the lead agency, and we've got a project initiation document going, and we've had some community scoping meetings. And as I mentioned earlier on the item that was referenced on the 67, government takes time. But if I can just, by these comments today, remind everybody of the issue regionally, and also see if I can spark a little fire of urgency under our agencies and individuals responsible for moving this project forward. That would be my hope for my comments today. And thank you very much. I appreciate your umbrance. Okay, are we all ready to move on? Any more comments?
Before you move on.
Oh, yeah, Anne, absolutely. Anne would like to say something. Anne, bring it on.
Thanks again, Vice Chair. And I am so sorry to hear of your loss, and it's tragic that we have to talk about this at all, and how so many of our families and community are impacted by suicide. So if I can provide a quick update on our project, I'll share that our Caltrans team continues to be laser focused on completing the environmental and the engineering studies for a permanent physical suicide deterrent solution on the bridge. The draft environmental document and deterrent alternatives is scheduled to be circulated for public review middle of this year, 2021, and then moving towards final approval of that environmental document middle of next year, 2022. This project isn't like any other we work on. It means so much more, and we're completely committed to getting this project moved into construction. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, and know that the City of Coronado is committed to continuing to partner with you and on this. And thank you for your comments this morning.
Chair Sankey.
Yes.
This is Mayor Sotelo Solis. I just
Madam Mayor, buenos dias.
Buenos dias. I just wanted to extend my condolences, one to you for your friend, the loss, and also to the loss of your friend's husband. Like you said, he was a father, a friend, community member, and I think, as Anne mentioned, it's also too about those mental health resources to continue helping all those. And the pandemic is truly shedding additional light on the pressures and just the pressure that a pandemic on top of everything else plays on every individual. So you have my deepest condolences, Chair Sankey. So
thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And at the risk of angering John or Amber and turning this into an agenda item, I'm going to thank everybody for your thoughts, and we'll go ahead and move along. And you do, Mayor Sotelo Solis, point out the larger issue. Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 3, Executive Director's Report. Hassan, would you share with us your Executive Director's Report, please?
Thank you, Vice Chair Sankey, and again, sorry for your friend. First of all, I want to wish you all Happy New Year. I want to welcome the newcomers to the Transportation Committee, council members, supervisors, welcome, and I'm sure you're gonna find it a great place to be to learn about transportation. This is the year 2021. It started. And at Sandag, this is an exciting year. We have a lot to look forward to. Later this year, the members of this committee and the board of Sandag will cut the ribbon for the largest infrastructure project in the region. That's the mid-coast. People having on this will be provided a one-seat ride from the border to the university. As we always said, reimagining the future transportation system in San Diego means that you have to build choices for people, and these choices have to be comparable. So a trip in the car, a trip that takes 20 minutes in the car shouldn't take 2 hours in the bus or the train. Just to give you an example of what we mean, pre-COVID, if you drove the 5 from the border to the university, and if you took the trolley that's going to open later this year, you will arrive earlier in the trolley than if you drove. That is comparable systems, comparable choices. I want to thank the amazing team that works in this from Sandag. This is the largest infrastructure project, but it's a project on time and on budget. How many times you could say a 2.1 infrastructure project is on time, on budget? We are able to say it because of our teams, Jim Lithicum, John Haggerty, Ramon, and everyone who's part of that team. So we're looking forward to opening that. Also this year, the board of directors will approve a long-awaited regional transportation plan. And that plan will be based on what you heard on the 5 big moves. That plan is bold. That plan requires leadership that we do have in the region to move a blueprint, to move the vision forward into the next decades for Sandag and for San Diegans to enjoy. This plan right now is in development. April of this year, in a few months, we will be releasing on the street the draft regional transportation plan, and then we'll be following that with the environmental impact report, which we expect to be done late summer. Obviously, the plan would mean nothing unless you have it funded and you build it. And reimagining the future transportation system in San Diego is not going to be cheap. But as Mayor Gloria said in his State of the City, nothing worth something is going to be cheap, and it is going to take short time to do. So I hope San Diegans are patient with Sandag to put together this plan. I'm going to turn to an important topic that will be discussed at our board next week. As many of you heard me say that we always knew that there is social inequities, social justice issues when it comes to transportation. I can spend the whole 2 hours of your meeting talking about examples of how transportation divided communities and impacted low income and minorities more than anybody else. It is time to stop that practice. It is time to correct the sins of the past. It is time to move forward and put forth a social equity criteria that judges all projects that Sandag does. So next week at the board, we'll be taking what we call an equity statement that we send to all of you in a draft form. We're still garnering input from our stakeholders and our sister agencies, but we would hope that the board at Sandag in a very firm way adopt the equity statement. A statement is a statement. It has to be followed by actions. Parallel to that, we're developing the equity criteria that we're going to be deploying to look at projects. This is significant And just want to caution you that this could make your very favorite project fall out and not be in the regional transportation plan. But that's the price of doing things right. And I look forward to working with you on that. One other issue that we're dealing with at Sandag, digital divide. Together with other agencies in Southern California, and specifically the 7 counties and 7 supervisors met. Our amazing future mobility director, Antoinette Meyer, is in charge of this. We're gonna develop a resolution that we're gonna be asked the board to adopt, but also we're gonna ask our cities to look at and see if it's appropriate for them to do so. Digital divide is real. Not everyone has the access to the broadband and Wi-Fi that we need. Our kids need that. We have an obligation. Our kids are learning virtually, but if they don't have good Wi-Fi or they won't learn. We have an obligation to do this right. And I hope the rest of this committee and the board will join Sandag in moving this forward. Happy to report to you that last week, we received an Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Grant from US DOT of $9.3 million. This is a small down payment on one of the 5 big moves, the next operating system. And the US Department of Transportation had about 49 million nationwide. We're the 2nd highest receiver and the only one in California to receive this grant. And again, this is because your staff, led by Antoinette and our grant writer, Julie Wiley, are amazing, are competing really well with the rest of the nation and the rest of the state. The grant will partially fund a border region project that's partnership between Sandag, Caltrans, the cities of San Diego and Chula Vista, MTS, and the Port of San Diego, and a few private sector partners. This grant pretty much is in line with our 5 big moves. It's the fairest of its kind in San Diego County. And let me conclude my report, Chairman, by a very good news. Truly great news. Sandag was successful in refinancing its Mid-Coast Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act loan, known as TIFIA, for a saving of $123 million over the life of the 25 loan. This is $123 million real money that your staff yesterday, late in the afternoon, closed. They came to my office at the Region Lab with their apple cider to celebrate. $123 million more money we have now because they were brilliant. And specifically, Andre and Don Visi, we'll talk about them, but Don, Vitse, and Andre are amazing. They've been working on this since March 2020, and they kept at it. And for Sandag to be the fairest in the country to take advantage of this, it's something, said something about them and their character. You're gonna hear from them today in one of the items that's coming up. But I couldn't be prouder to work with such an amazing team. And I hope you take some time, if you see them, well, obviously virtually or otherwise, you see them, you say thank you to them. I will say one of the things I look forward in 2021 is stop doing Zoom and Microsoft Teams and see you in person. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Hassan, I'll just start with an aside and say that as I work with individuals like you who, as leaders, understand the importance of recognizing the contributions of your staff and team members, you are eloquent at that. You do it at every opportunity, and I absolutely, and I'm certain everybody on this committee shares our admiration for everybody, Andre, everybody in the organization when it comes to the financing and everybody else in terms of planning. You mentioned Antoinette, her valuable contributions are immeasurable. But again, I think especially for the new members, working with this team has been an absolute joy for me, and I appreciate your leadership, Hassan. Thank you. Are there any public comments on the Executive Director's report?
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any hands.
Thank you, Francesca. Any member comments or questions for Hassan? All right. Francesca, seeing no hands. Am I correct? Seeing no hands?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. There's a couple items on there that Hassan felt he wanted to share some background information on. And so I will give the floor to Hassan to introduce the consent agenda, and then we'll ask for anybody if they need other comments or items pulled. So Hassan, if you would go ahead and continue.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you. Before you vote on the consent agenda, I need to add one more piece of information about items 4 and 5 in the consent agenda. Those two items are the TransNet interfund loan and the MOU with the County of San Diego and the TransNet debt financing program. On Wednesday, the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee voted unanimously to recommend that the Transportation Committee recommend approval of the interfund loan and the TransNet debt financing program. ITAC, which is the Independent Tax Oversight Committee, took this action independently as staff was not seeking a formal recommendation. We want to be sure to recognize ITAC's action as the item are on consent. So this is not staff-driven, the ITAC. Just want to make sure that's what they wanted us to tell you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Hassan, and I appreciate, when we did our pre-meeting, I did ask the staff to tell me what ITAC had comments on, because I thought it would be helpful for this committee to make a decision on those items, and bringing the attention to me that that was a self-initiated item by the committee. The ITAC committee is that much more reassuring. So thank you. So for the consent agenda, items 4 through 8, are there any questions, or does anybody desire to make comments or have an item pulled?
Othello Solis, move to approve items 4 through 8.
All right, that would be approving the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second, Hudson.
Thank you, Jewel. I appreciate that. Great hearing from you. Is there any other discussion on the item before we vote? I'm going to take that as a no. Francesca, is that correct?
I don't see any hands, Vice Chair.
Okay, then go ahead, and we didn't have any public comments as well. I want to make sure I don't forget that. Or did I remember that? I remembered that. Okay.
No, we don't have any hands from the public either.
Good, thank you. Let's go ahead and do the vote then. Thank you.
For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Joanna Schiavone.
Schiavone, yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Thank you. For Metropolitan Transit System, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. North County Transit District is absent. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Benelli.
Benelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Vice Chair Sankey.
Sankey, aye.
Thank you very much. And that does pass unanimously with those members present.
All right, thank you, everyone. Moving right along to reports. Item 9A and 9B are the TransNet financial strategies. I'd like to begin by calling on Andre to talk about agenda item 9, both 9A and 9B. It's a discussion item with a possible action.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Vice Chair Sankey, and good morning, Transportation Committee members. So at last week's board meeting, staff presented an overview of the priority projects. The last slide was a timeline of the busy first quarter that we are going to have to support these projects. The number of financial items that we'll be presenting to the Transportation Committee and to the board for review and approval. So today we officially kick off the busy slate of items that will be coming to you. In item number 9, we have transactions that are similar in nature, but have separate documents and will ultimately require independent approval. So we are presenting them as items 9A and 9B. So we'll start off with item 9A, which is an overview of the proposed 2021 bond issuance, a refunding, and a new money piece. Next slide, please. So besides the Sandac staff that is working on this transaction, as always, we have procured a finance team that will assist us through this transaction. That includes PFM, our financial advisors, ORIC, our bond counsel, Norton Rose, our disclosure counsel, and this time, for the first time, we actually have co-senior underwriters of Wells Fargo and the Bank of America. The reason for this is one of the transactions here is a taxable transaction, the other one is a tax exempt, and each underwriter will run each one of those books. And in addition to that, we have co-managers on this with Morgan Stanley and Jefferies. So today's item is mentioned as informational only, and Peter Schellenberger from PFM is actually on the Zoom call with us today. And there is an attachment from PFM which actually also details, I'm going to give you an overview today, and the memo that he has details it. I do apologize though, the memos that we have attached to the actual item should be swapped. 9A should be in 9B, 9B should be in 9A. So just take that into consideration as we go through the item today. And then the rest of the finance team that I mentioned will be at our next meetings when we actually review the bond documents and look for the TC to move approval to the board. Next slide, please. So in today's presentation, we'll be looking at, why are we issuing these bonds? There's a refunding piece and a new money piece. We will look at the potential size and structure of these bonds. We will look at the credit ratings and then the upcoming calendar of events. Next slide, please. So firstly, why are we issuing these bonds? So if you recall at the November 13th Transportation Committee meeting, we presented an item that based on the current revenue projections, we would need an additional $170 to $220 million over the next 5 fiscal years, that is 21 through 25, to cover the project costs that are currently included in the SANDAG program budget. With the SANDAG's financial advisors at PFM, we identified a number of strategies that would enable us to potentially cover that shortfall. And as you can see from the highlighted item over there in the very top, one of them was to refinance the existing bonds to lower borrowing costs and issue new bonds. So that is the item that we'll be looking at specifically today. Next slide, please. So as Hassan mentioned in his comments, the very first item that we had as far as a summary of upcoming transactions, we actually managed to close the TIFIA loan just yesterday. And you can see that the rate was at 2.72%. And sometimes they're saying it's better to be lucky than good. We had projected approximately 1.75% a couple of weeks ago. Actually, that turned out to be the exact rate that we locked in at yesterday. And just a quick background for this. I mean, Hassan did mention that we're the first in the country to secure a refinancing, and we're very proud of that. I think back in March when the Federal Reserve basically cut short-term interest rates to 0, which is kind of unprecedented, the long-term rates basically followed suit. And in fact, at one point, the 30-year Treasury had fallen below 1%. That's when we called the TIFIA office and we asked them, hey, is there potential for us to refinance this loan? The initial response was no. We continued to pester them, if you will, over the next couple of months. And ultimately, we started to form a finance team. So I'd like to thank PFM, our counsel on this, Victor Shu, along with our staff, in particular, Jose and Don. And I'd like to really thank Don for really from the time that we started this, like 6 months in earnest till now, she's been with the TIFIA office day in and day out. So really, if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have been the first in the country. And as interest rates tick up slightly over the last few months, we're happy to get in and get out. So again, thank you to the entire team. So today we'll be looking at items 2 and 3. We're looking to potentially advance refund the 2014 bonds and then issue approximately $85 million in tax-exempt new money for the potential projects that are upcoming this year. So taking a look at the next slide, one of the things that we're pretty proud of here at Sandag is that we are AAA rated by both S&P and Fitch. Now, these are the highest ratings given by rating agencies, and there's only 5% of municipal issuers throughout the country that can boast such high ratings. And every time that we take on a transaction, we consider that and ensure that we can maintain those ratings. And then we have fairly strong ratings on our subordinate lien at AA. And having worked with TIFIA recently, we actually had to show them the upcoming transactions. So we presented those to the rating agencies, and we're fairly confident that the ratings that you see in front of you today is the way what we'll maintain coming out of these transactions as well. Now, I realize for some of the new board members, this is a little much to take in one little meeting here today, but coming up in February, we have a new board member orientation that we'll talk a little bit more about our debt program here at Sandag. So the next slide, please. So the 2 transactions that we'll be looking at is one is going to be the refunding. That's, as I mentioned, the 2014 series of bonds. Based on where the interest rates were back then, today we can refinance those, approximately $150 million in par. We should save approximately $20 million based on if interest rates stay where they are today. These will be taxable bonds, and they will be remaining on our senior lien. And there's potential that we may tender these bonds. It's an option for us that we've never taken before. It's a little complicated, but in essence, if we are able to tender these bonds, we could tender them and put them on a tax-exempt basis, which would actually even increase our savings. And then the 2021 Series B bonds, this will be a new money issuance, and they'll be for approximately $85 million, and based on the premium that we'll receive will be approximately $113 million in the project fund. Now, this is the first time that we're putting long-term bonds actually on our subordinate lien. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're always very cautious to make sure that we maintain our AAA ratings. And today, since interest rates are so low, there's a very variable, very small difference between a AAA rating and a AA rating as far as the interest rate cost. Been advised that it's less than 10 basis points. So for us, it made a good strategy to put these on our subordinate lien and then keep our senior lien more flexible for the future. And again, these will be on a tax-exempt basis. So going to the last slide, please. So we will give a similar review to the Board of Directors next week. We expect formal ratings on these transactions by the rating agencies February 1st. And we will come back to the Transportation Committee with the full team, review the final bond documents. We will then look for approval from the Transportation Committee to take it to the board the following week, of which we will look for after their review, an approval. And once we get the approval, we will post a preliminary official statement and start marketing the bonds. We anticipate that these bonds will price the week of March 8th, with closing before the end of the first quarter or March 22nd. Now with that, Vice Chair Sankey, I do have a second presentation at 9B, but I'll maybe pause to see if there may be any questions at this point, or if you'd like me to, I could take item 9B as well and wait for questions at the end.
I think a pause for questions might be good. And at this moment, I'd also, my notes asked me to call on Hassan to introduce you, Andre. So if I could pass this back to Hassan for a second. You had some introductory remarks that I overlooked on my notes here. So Hassan, if you'd like to go ahead and share those remarks now. And then Andre, if there's no other questions after that, then we'll move right into 9B.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I will be very short. I would just, I think, remind the members of this committee, and maybe the new ones didn't have the the ability to listen to the last discussion. This is discussion relates to the fact that we have about $220 million of cash flow issue right now. And that's $250 million. That's a lot of money. That means that that much money is going to have to be figured out before projects that are starting and projects that are planned can move forward. So instead of us coming to you and saying, okay, these projects need to stop and these projects cannot start, we ask our team, the one you just heard from, our amazing CFO, who is, by the way, the CFO of the year by Business Week, just so remind you. We ask all of our staff, Jose from the finance, to be as creative as possible so we don't have to stop project and we don't have to not start a new project. This is one mechanism, that financing is one mechanism. So we're hoping that once we do everything we told you we're gonna do to minimize the impact of this cash flow issue, that the number will not be 220, but the number will be less than 100 million. It's still a real issue, a major issue. But I just wanted to say that what Andre is talking about is the ability of the staff to figure out how we minimize that $250 million cash flow issues. And so with that, I'll send it back to you, Vice Chair.
Thanks very much. I think transparency is the hallmark of what we're looking for here. It's important for the community to understand that we do have a shortfall and that we're working hard to solve it. Any questions at this point for Andre? If I'll chip it to the committee for that. No comments there, Francesca, no hands. Okay,
No,
go ahead.
Vice Chair, I don't get it.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Andre, go ahead and kick off 9B, and then we'll open it for public comment and then any other member comments following your presentation.
Great, thank you. So similar to the previous item where we're looking to refinance a portion of our long-term notes, this is we're looking to refinance our short-term notes. And next slide, please. So similar to the previous item, again, we have procured a team that will assist us through this transaction with a little bit of a different group. PFM will still be our financial advisors, and our bond counsel and disclosure counsel will be in Norton Rose Fulbright. And then on this particular transaction, Citibank will be our leading manager. And we also have co-managers of Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Siebert, and Academy Securities. Next slide, please. So again, I'll go through, why we're going to refund these notes, the size and structure of it, again, the credit ratings, and then the calendar of events. Next slide. So again, as mentioned, the November meeting that we brought, Hassan just mentioned the shortfall. This is one of the strategies, again, to tackle the potential shortfall that we have by refinancing these short-term notes. And then the next slide. This is item 4 of the summary list, and maybe just to give you a little bit of a background, and so hopefully it'll make more sense as to exactly what these notes are. So as mentioned, we had a TIFIA loan that we took out in 2017 that we were going to, again, this is for the Mid-Coast construction funds towards it. And this is a long-term note that goes out till the end of our TransNet program. And this is a long-term note and very attractive interest rate of 2.72% at the time when we took it out. However, short-term rates were a lot lower. In fact, back in the day when we took out the bans in 2018, the rates were approximately 1.85%. So this was kind of financial engineering as opposed to using the long-term rate right away. Why not use a short-term rate, a short-term vehicle at 1.85%? So we basically saved approximately just under 1% over the time period during the construction. And here we are again today with rates being lower than they were in 2017. As just noted, we refinanced the TIFIA loan to a lot lower level. And what we're doing is basically rolling these bands or these short-term notes, which are called bond anticipation notes. And so they were going to come due here in April. We're going to be rolling them for another 18 months. And actually today, as interest rates are really low on the short end, we're going to be refinancing these notes at approximately 50 basis points. So we're actually gaining over 1% versus where the 1.75% is on the TIFIA loans, which will ultimately take out these notes. So by doing this, we're saving approximately not as much as the $123 million on the TIFIA loan, but we are still saving $10 million. And obviously, every single dollar goes towards our projects as money saved. Makes sense for us to do that. So the next slide, please. So again, these current bands sit on our subordinate lien, very strong AA rated. And again, as I mentioned, Citigroup just confirmed with me this morning that potentially based on where rates are today, we should get as low a rate as 0.5%. Next slide, please. And so the par amount will be the exact amount that is outstanding today, $537.5 million. As mentioned, $10 million in savings. There'll be tax exempt bonds, and again, on our subordinate lien. And the final slide, very similar to previously, we'll take this to the board next week, receive ratings in early February, then we'll come back to the TC, looking for a final recommend to the board after you've reviewed the documents, and we'll go to the board February 12th, final review of the note documents. We'll post the preliminary official statement February 15th, and anticipated pricing is the 22nd, and hopefully, again, close before the end of the first quarter on March 15th. So with that, Vice Chair, ends my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Andre and Don and everybody on that team. Jose, amazingly large transactions as when you think about it, but in terms of the finance gains that the organization will achieve, they're fundamentally important to our long-term goals of getting infrastructure done. So any public comments on this particular item?
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any hands.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. Any member comments on this particular item? Okay, we're going to see this thing again in a much more detailed format, legally required, actually, detailed format to forward to the board for approval. But I want to thank you very much, Andre and team, for the report this morning. Thanks, Andre. Moving on to item number 10, the Central Mobility Hub and Connections Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. With us today is Rachel Kennedy to bring us information on this important infrastructure project that's central not only to our region, but to our overall transit goals. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Transportation Committee. In July 2019, the Board of Directors directed staff to continue public outreach and develop a regional plan with the 5 big moves and complete corridor model, including highway and transit improvements, and prioritizing corridors previously scheduled for investment, such as State Route 78, 52, 67, and 94 and 125. In September 2019, the Board of Directors approved $40 million to fund the development of 12 corridor plans over the next 5 years. This work is being done concurrently with the development of the 2021 regional plan. Concepts for each of the corridors have been included in the vision that was presented to the policy advisory committees and the Board of Directors in August, and will be carried through the development of the 2021 regional plan. The corridor plans provide more detail at a sub-regional level than the concepts that are included in the regional plan, which are developed at a higher regional level. The details in each of the corridor plans will help SANDAG compete for Senate Bill 1 funds. The corridor plans will examine transit, highway, active transportation, and local roadway projects that can help improve mobility for people and for goods, as well as the technologies, mobility hubs, and policies that will allow for them to operate smoothly. Next slide, please. There are currently 5 corridor plans under development as shown on this map. Over the past few months, you've received updates on the North County Corridor shown in yellow, the South Bay to Sorrento Corridor shown in purple, the Coast Canyons and Trails Corridor shown in green, and last month you received an update on the San Vicente Corridor shown in orange. Today, we'll be providing you with an update on the Central Mobility Hub and Connections Corridor Plan, which is shown in blue. The Central Mobility Hub and Connections Corridor includes the communities within the city of San Diego, including downtown San Diego, Old Town, Midway Pacific Highway, portions of Ocean Beach, Point Loma, Uptown, and the San Diego International Airport. Planning and project development is often an iterative process. The corridor study teams will be using transportation and demographic data, strategies included in the 5 big moves, and input from partner agencies, stakeholders, the public, and this committee to identify challenges and opportunities. The transportation solutions identified in these plans will help to inform future regional plans. While we're working on the corridor plans, there are also ongoing efforts within the corridor. And today I have with me today is Nicola Bernard, Caltrans Trade Corridor Project Manager, and the Caltrans staff lead with me on this project. And Nicola is going to provide an update on recent and ongoing projects in the corridor, and then I will provide an update on the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan effort underway. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Nicola.
Next slide, please. Good morning. As a little background, I-8 and I-5 through this Central Mobility Hub corridor were first constructed in the 1960s. While there haven't been major construction projects on the freeway corridor since then, there has been quite a lot of work completed over the last 10 years within and adjacent to the corridor. Next slide, please. Currently in construction is the West Mission Bay Drive project, which is a City of San Diego project that is replacing the West Mission Bay Drive Bridge from I-8 over the San Diego River. Most of the project is in City of San Diego right-of-way, but it also includes widening of the I-8 westbound off-ramp to Sports Arena Boulevard and West Mission Bay Drive. Also included in the project is a separated multi-use path on the new structure along with connections to existing bike routes. Next slide, please. In 2006, voters approved Proposition 1B, and one of the programs included was Trade Corridor Improvement Funds, from which Sandag, Caltrans, and the Port of San Diego received funding for several projects on the I-5 corridor to improve access to the working waterfront. Although these projects are just outside the Central Mobility Hub corridor, the improvements affect travel through and around the corridor. The projects include 10th Avenue, Civic Center Drive, Bay Marina Drive, and 32nd Investor Street. They provided operational improvements and context-sensitive solutions, including improved access to the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, creating larger radius curves, making it easier for trucks to make turns, repaving the roadway, and improving crosswalks and intersections. And one improvement we're most proud of is the 10th Avenue project, which was a context-sensitive solution that constructed the gateway sign you see here for Barrio Logan. This sign deters trucks from using Cesar Chavez Parkway and traveling through the community. It was quite rewarding that the community had an active participation in the design of the sign, and it ultimately provided a unique and cost-effective solution to an ongoing problem in an environmental justice community. And on each of these projects, Caltrans coordinated with Sandag, the city, and the Port of San Diego. Next slide, please. As a follow-up to the Trade Corridor Improvement Funds projects, we are currently beginning environmental studies of what we call the Vesta Street project, which also includes work on Harbor Drive, Main Street, and connections to State Route 15. The project will study also operational improvements to improve accessibility around the working waterfront, as well as access to and from Naval Base San Diego. This will provide goods movement, improve goods movement by facilitating access within the state highway system for truck traffic generated by the working waterfront, again, deterring travel through the community. This project will also complete the Harbor Drive 2.0 concept of operations, which will provide the long-term vision for the Harbor Drive corridor, including multimodal and technology solutions. It has been rewarding working with the Port of San Diego and Sandag on this project, and we just executed the Memorandum of Understanding outlining agency cooperation on the project. Next slide, please. We have also completed various maintenance and operational improvement projects throughout and adjacent to the corridor, including freeway striping and interstate shield markers, repaving ramps, replacing 80 signs with highly reflective signs. And as no power is needed to light these signs, they need less maintenance and save energy. We've restored 3 major culverts, which are important because if these fail, we may get sinkholes shutting down all or part of the roadway. We've completed some ITS projects, including installing video detection systems and replacing loops, which allow us to monitor vehicle speeds and congestion, as well as classify vehicles by type. And just a note, about half of these maintenance projects that are currently in design and construction are funded by SB1 State of Good Repair funds. Next slide, please. And here are some additional projects we've been working on that either affect or are in the corridor. We're beginning construction on a project that will install fiber optic cable on I-5 and 805. This project will complete the infrastructure needed to connect the I-5, State Route 125, I-805, and State Route 905 with Caltrans Traffic Management Center and facilitate communications for the future Otay Mesa East, State Route 11 tolling and congestion pricing solution. The project also adds border wait time systems at all ports of entry along the California-Mexico border. This will allow travelers to accurately determine the best route and ports of entry for their travel needs in San Diego and Imperial counties, providing valuable information to travelers from downtown San Diego as well as throughout the county. In 2019, we worked with SANDAG and the Airport Authority to complete the airport feasibility study, which developed preliminary alternatives to mitigate traffic impacts for the airport expansion onto the state highway system. And last year, we worked with SANDAG to develop alternatives to improve freeway access to the proposed Central Mobility Hub. This year, we will provide oversight on a project study report, project development study, PSR-PDS, that will consider all developments within and around the Central Mobility Hub corridor and will develop transportation alternatives to mitigate these impacts. The purpose of this PSR-PDS is to gain approval for the project to move into the environmental phase of the project. Thank you, and now I'll turn it back to Rachel.
Thank you, Nicola. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to highlight some of the data that we've gathered and work done to date on the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. Next slide, please. So the Central Mobility Hub and Connections Corridor Plan includes the communities within the city of San Diego, including downtown San Diego, Old Town, Pacific, Midway Pacific Highway, and portions of Ocean Beach, Point Loma Uptown, and the San Diego International Airport. The study area is focused on the communities that are surrounding the two sites that are being considered for a potential future Central Mobility Hub. And these include the Navy's Old Town campus, which is currently home to NAVWAR, and the Intermodal Transportation Center site located just south of Washington Street. The corridor plan will focus on defining transportation solutions for the areas that are shown in dark blue. Similar to the San Vicente corridor that was featured at your November meeting, this plan also includes an area of influence, which is shown here in light blue. And the study team is considering demographic characteristics and travel patterns of the surrounding communities. Next slide, please. SANDAG and Caltrans are developing the Central Mobility Hub and Connections Corridor Plan in collaboration with the City of San Diego, the Metropolitan Transit System, the North County Transit District, Port of San Diego County Airport Authority, and the U.S. Navy. And representatives from each organization make up the project study team. Additionally, staff are coordinating with community planning groups, the U.S. Coast Guard, the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and other stakeholders. Information on the corridor plan has been shared with the community planning groups in the corridor, and a public workshop is being planned for late February. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to provide you with some demographic information about our corridor. Together, the study area and areas of influence for this corridor comprise nearly 6% of the region's population, with approximately 183,000 residents. The area is home to more than 12% of the region's jobs, with the largest concentration of jobs being located in downtown San Diego. The study area includes employment in a variety of sectors, including professional services, local and federal government, transportation, retail, and healthcare. The corridor also contains approximately 84,000 housing units, which is 7% of the region's total housing. And this includes a mixture of single-family, multifamily, and military housing. The corridor is also home to just under 12,000 seniors, or about 6% of the region's senior population, and has nearly 25,000 low-income households, which is about 7% of the region's low-income population. Additionally, the corridor is home to 68,000 people who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which is approximately 4% of the region's BIPOC population. Next slide, please. So to better understand the corridor, we also looked at growth within the corridor over the last 20 years. And as you can see here, since 2020, the corridor has experienced population growth of 50%. Housing units have increased by 38%, and jobs have grown at a lesser degree by 12%. Next slide, please. So the corridor plan study area includes downtown San Diego, which is a tier 1 job center and the 3rd largest employment center within our region. With over 76,000 employees, it comprises 5% of the region's employees and the highest concentration of jobs with more than 27,000 employees per square mile. So within our region, it's sort of the densest area. We have the most jobs packed into each square block. The study area also includes job centers in Ocean Beach with nearly 26,000 employees, and the Tier 3 Airport Employment Center, which includes more than 21,000 employees. The area of influence also includes the Tier 2 Hillcrest and Mission Valley job centers, as well as portions of the job centers in Pacific Beach and the University of San Diego. Next slide, please. This corridor is one of the most transit-rich areas in the region, with several important multimodal transit centers, including the Old Town Transit Center, Santa Fe Depot, America Plaza, and City College Transit Center. The area is currently served by Amtrak, Intercity Rail, and Coaster commuter service, with stops at the Old Town Transit Center and Santa Fe Depot. The area is also served by the Green, Blue, and Orange Line trolley, which provides connections to the south and east. And in the near future, Midcoast will provide connections to the north to the communities of Claremont, UCSD, and the University City area. Each of the region's rapid bus services connect to downtown San Diego, and multiple local buses provide service in Point Loma, Midway, Old Town, downtown San Diego, and Uptown, as well as connections to points within the region. And additionally, ferry service connects downtown to Coronado. Next slide, please. This corridor includes a number of active transportation projects as well. It includes the San Diego River Trail, the Harbor Drive Bike Path, and a portion of the Bayshore Bikeway, as well as some new protected bikeways in downtown San Diego and several arterial streets with bike lanes. Overall, there are numerous gaps in the existing bike network, with a few safe and comfortable options for people to ride bikes in a continuous manner throughout our study area, especially along Pacific Highway in the Midway community. Downtown, Old Town, and some portions of Point Loma have a comprehensive pedestrian network where it's easy and safe for people to walk. But other areas within our study area in Midway and along Pacific Highway are lacking in connectivity, and some areas don't contain sidewalks. Next slide, please. So the Central Mobility Hub and Connections Corridor contains a number of activity centers, including the San Diego International Airport, the Sports Arena, the San Diego Bay Waterfront, Liberty Station, and regional medical facilities. And the University of San Diego, Point Loma Nazarene University, SeaWorld, Balboa Park are in the planned areas of influence. So we have a number of local, regional destinations that attract people from within our region and beyond. So understanding current travel patterns is important to help identify future transportation solutions. And this slide here is just showing you a sample query from a data set that we procured from the private sector that shows major trip flows that occur within or between segments of the downtown area and the airport, as well as other portions of our study area. With regional destinations such as the airport in downtown San Diego, this corridor attracts trips from throughout the region and beyond. And that also has quite a bit of travel that is occurring between the different census tracts within our study area. We also know that heavy travel flow can create congestion, particularly during the morning and afternoon peak periods. We have been looking at the Caltrans PEM data set as well to identify pinch points within our study area. And along I-5, we have noted a number of pinch points. Southbound I-5 at 5th Avenue, which is the 4th most impacted pinch point in the region, is located in our study area. And we also experience pinch points at the I-5 and Grape Street, northbound I-5 at SeaWorld Drive, and others. And also along I-8, we've identified a couple areas of challenge along the eastbound I-8 at Rosecrans and with the I-8 connections to Old Town. Next slide, please. So together, the study area and areas of influence for our quarter plan comprise nearly 6% of the region's population with 183 residents. And the greatest concentration of housing is located in downtown San Diego, in Midway and Liberty Station area, with additional concentrations in the adjacent Ocean Beach and Uptown communities. Next slide, please. So this slide here shows our communities of concern. As I noted earlier, we have just under 12,000 seniors within our corridor area, about 6% of the region's seniors. We have 68,000 people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, about 4% of our region's BIPOC population, as well as about 25,000 low-income households. And as transportation solutions are developed, we're going to be working to ensure that the projects and programs and policies that are identified provide high quality transportation connections and access to the area's most vulnerable residents. Next slide, please. With future climate change, sea level rise is an area of concern for this corridor, given its inclusion of the San Diego Bay. And as the team looks to transportation solutions within the corridor, we're going to be considering how sea level rise may cause short-term flooding and longer-term inundation of transportation facilities. Regional facilities that will be impacted by sea level rise were analyzed in SANDAG's Regional Transportation Infrastructure Sea Level Rise Assessment document. And we've included a few of the key facilities located within our study area on this slide. In addition, SANDAG was recently awarded funding from the Office of Economic Adjustment to work on a military resiliency grant in partnership with the Department of the Navy. And one focus of this concurrent effort, which we're coordinating with our corridor plan as well, is to understand how climate change impacts will affect naval bases located along the San Diego Bay Area. And this project will allow planners to look at climate change impacts through the lens of the Navy, and ensuring that the Navy perspective is also captured in long-term planning for this area. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next one. So in speaking with study stakeholders and reviewing existing documents and data, a number of challenges have been identified. Currently, the design of many arterial streets is vehicle-oriented, and highway facilities create barriers for easy bike and pedestrian movements. While the study area does contain a number of transit services, current mode share is still highly auto-oriented, which creates congestion on the freeways and local street network, particularly during peak periods. Current access to the airport, which is a regional destination, is limited currently to driving and to bus service from downtown San Diego. There are also a number of redevelopment opportunities within the study area, such as the redevelopment of the old post office site and the sports arena. And future transportation solutions will need to look at resolving existing transportation challenges while also serving these new developments. And we've also noted that this area is likely to experience impacts from climate change, and this will need to be considered in development of future transportation solutions. Next slide, please. Now, with challenges also come opportunities, and this corridor plan will develop multimodal transportation solutions to better serve people walking, biking, driving, and using transit. A future central mobility hub could serve as a focal point for the regional transit system and provide opportunities for riders to transfer between multiple services connecting to destinations throughout the region and beyond, as well as directly to the San Diego airport. Many of the communities in this corridor have recently updated their community plans, and we're working with the City of San Diego, and this corridor plan can build upon and support the community vision for this area. And additionally, the corridor plan will integrate the 5 big move strategies to improve access to job centers, healthcare, and military installations in the corridor. Next slide, please. As you're all aware, San Diego is simultaneously working to develop the 2021 regional plan. And this quarter plan will utilize the 5 big move strategies to identify transportation solutions for the corridor, and projects identified in the plan can be integrated into future regional plans. Next slide, please. So this slide here shows our high-level schedule for the corridor plan development. Over the summer and fall, we worked to bring our consultant team on board. We reviewed existing plans and data and conducted stakeholder outreach. And this winter and spring, we're going to be working to develop the transportation solutions and sharing them with the stakeholders and public for input. We'll then be utilizing modeling and performance measures to evaluate these draft solutions and refining them, and then developing a draft and final quarter plan in the summer and fall of this year. Next slide. This slide here contains some contact information about our webpage that we have on the SANDAG website, and information to contact Nicola and I. And next slide. And with that, we'd like to turn the presentation back over to the chair for questions, and Nicola and I are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and also Nicola. And it's particularly important to pay attention to these kind of reports for our newer members. The multimodal hub has been talked about for years at our board level, and certainly will, when we think about projects that are affecting our region, be one of the largest, should it come to pass, that and have the biggest impact. And the opportunities for the public-private partnership with the Navy on that land and moving forward really presents a lot of opportunities, and as you developed in that slide, also challenges. Do we have any public comments on this particular agenda item? Francesca, I take that as a no.
No, Chair, I apologize. We don't have any public.
No problem at all.
I do see a hand raised from Councilmember Edson, though.
Yeah, we're getting. My next thing is to get to committee member comments. So, Jewel, why don't you go ahead and take it first? Microphone, Jewel.
Sorry about that.
No
I got the video on. It was at least one thing. Thank you, Vice Chair. And also thank you, Rachel and Nicola, for your very thorough report. There's a lot of moving parts to this matter. I've been a long time advocate of creating more seamless, direct, and quality transit connections to the airport. So it's exciting as this continues to develop. The staff report mentioned key considerations, including planning for climate change impacts, and that was touched on as well in this presentation, such as sea level rise. Also, ensuring the functionality of the corridor into the future. With that in mind, I think it's also important to remember that there are key projects in the North Coast corridor that are shovel ready and not fully funded, which include the San Diego Bridge at the fairgrounds and the Bataquitos Bridge project. Those projects, while not within the Central Mobility Hub corridor, do impact it. And so I think it's important that NCTD's TransNet projects are not impacted in funding this new project. So lots to consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Jewel. Any other comments from committee members? No, we're going to take that as a no.
Vice Chair, Commissioner
Mr. Bonelli.
Admiral Bonelli, please join us and share your comments.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. First of all, thank you for the comprehensive report. It's a lot to take in, covers a lot of ground. Just to drill down a little fidelity, first of all, I appreciate the work of SANDAG, Caltrans, our partners in City of San Diego, National City, and down in Chula Vista, as well as the Navy Department. Just to give you a little perspective from the port, we're all about moving people, goods, and services. And from the goods perspective, when you look at our 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, as well as the National City Marine Terminal, at 10th Avenue, we're looking to quadruple the amount of things that are moved in and out of that port there. And when we look down at National City right now, we're moving about 450,000 cars, mainly down at the National City Marine Terminal. We're going to double that over the next 10 years, and we're going to quadruple the amount of goods that come into the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. So it's real important, and I'm optimistic that the work we're doing on Harbor Drive will benefit the entire region. It's about today, it's about $4.5 billion worth of goods movement and employs tens of thousands of people. And I appreciate the comprehensive nature that Sandag's taking on this particular item.
Thank you, Admiral Benelli. Cogent remarks, particularly understanding what's happening on Harbor Drive in the mix. I know that the bike lane that's going, Bayshore Bikeway, has a lot to do with what's happening on Harbor Drive as well. So those will also be multimodal improvements that will benefit the region as a whole. Any other questions or comments from committee members?
Vice Chair Councilmember Campea.
Thank you,
Councilmember.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Nicola, for this presentation. Just wanted to say I'm really excited about this project in particular, and you pointed out a lot of the opportunities that come with this, improving access to job centers, healthcare, military installations. I know one thing that many of my constituents have brought up consistently, especially given the situation in the pandemic, is need for childcare facilities, and wanted to say that this is a potential opportunity as well to have a facility like that for parents who are taking public transit to work, and making it an easy stop off where they can have their children in childcare and then be able to pick them up on the way back. I'd also just thinking through my time living in New York and time living in Boston, how as families take public transit like this through major hubs, just becomes part of the culture of using it, and so that children see their parents using it, and then over the course of time, we then see mode share, a percentage of mode share go through these hubs, just increases it over time. So I would just want to put that in the back of your mind, and just say that I know that that's probably been brought up somewhere else, but I'd love for you guys to just put that on the checklist and keep it in your mind. The last thing I'd say is there plans for things like electrification of buildings, or other very specific climate action plan sort of directed mechanisms built into this, besides the fact that it will be much better to have people using public transit than cars?
Yes, so one of the things that we are looking at is also, accommodating for electrical vehicle charging, for example. This would be one of the premier mobility hubs within the region, so it provides a lot of opportunity to bring together, not only some of our more traditional transit services, but also flexible fleets, the other opportunities for, bikes, scooters, different ways to kind of walk, roll, ride within the facility. And, some of the elements will probably get outlined a bit further down in the process when the actual Central Mobility Hub, would come to fruition and some of those more detailed design elements. But it's certainly, those are all things that we're thinking about, and particularly from the transportation perspective, what would need to be included to be supporting either current or future, climate change friendly modes.
Wonderful.
Nicola, did you want to add anything? Nicola, would you like to add anything?
Sorry, I had trouble unmuting. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. And Raul, you bring up a really interesting point. Part of, if should the mobility hub go forward, along with the more ambitious housing plans that are planned for the multi-use area, the childcare options seem pretty interesting. I thought, a stop on the trolley that said, kids playground for the day or whatever, sounds very intriguing. And it's also very refreshing to hear how up to speed you are already as a committee member in terms of innovative thinking experience with both the Boston and the New York systems. And so I got to say, really interesting thought, and I look forward to working with you further.
Thank you very much for that. And I'd have to give credit to my policy director, Justine, for working really hard to prep me for all this, but bring that, I rely on my staff just as much as everybody else here does. So they did a great job. But just thinking back to my I remember when I lived in New York, an intern who was 17 in the same organization that I was working with said that they had just gone about 70 blocks on the subway. And I said, your parents trust you to go 70 blocks on the subway? And she said, yeah, I used to take it to school when I was 13. And I was like, I could never imagine my family ever let me walk down the street a couple miles to go to school. So, you know, I just, it's how it changes our culture is really important. That really opened my eyes to that. But I really appreciate you all. And thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, for that compliment.
You bet, Ro. We hear a lot of discussion about mode share and about changing our lives to live in a different kind of world as we move forward. And it's very refreshing to have this kind of planning going forward, because I think over time, if you build it, they will come. Let's see. So is that it for comments from member committees? Committee members, excuse me. Francesca, I'm going to call that a no.
I don't see any other hands, Vice Chair.
Okay, groovy. Thanks so much, Rachel and Nicola, for your remarks this morning. Moving right along, and thank you for the fast pace of today's meeting. There's a lot to do, and we've got a couple more reports, and I'm hoping that the folks that are going to be giving them will give them with the alacrity and sense of need to get us all onto our next adventures as soon as possible. And Raul, I'm jealous. You have staff. As a council member, I got nothing. Go ahead with number 11. I think Ramon is going to give us a presentation to get us all caught up in that amazing project that Hassoun referred to earlier, the one-seat ride from the border to UTC. That absolutely competes with the roadway for your travel pleasure. So go ahead, Ramon, and get us caught up with the Mid-Coast Corridor project.
Good morning, Vice Chair Sankey and members of the Transportation Committee. I'm here today to present you the quarterly update for the Mid-Coast Trolley Project. Next slide, please. So many of you are already likely familiar with the route map. The Mid-Coast Trolley Extension will extend existing Blue Line service from Santa Fe Depot downtown to the University City community. We continue to be on course, as Hassan said earlier, to start revenue service late this year, and we still expect to finish within the $2.17 billion budget that has been allocated to the projects. Next slide. Our construction contractor, Mid-Coast Transit Constructor, is now over 80% expended on construction. Stations, overhead catenary, landscaping and irrigation, and track signal work are currently the focus of construction. We have also begun planning efforts for the project's grand opening and ribbon cutting celebration. At this time, we are hopeful that COVID-19 will not prevent us from giving this historic project, the celebration it deserves. We will continue to monitor the county's health guidelines as planning progresses to ensure that we mark the opening of new service appropriately. Next slide, please. This milestone schedule has basically remained the same to what we had shared at our last update, with final completion and revenue service approximately 2 months behind the original 2016 baseline. Next slide, please. This banana chart is just a graphical representation of how construction has progressed over time. It serves as another indicator that construction progress continues to trend in a very positive direction. Next slide, please. The project is a huge boost to the local economy. So far, it has employed over 4,000 workers on site and paid over $170 million in wages, excluding fringe benefits. Next slide. Our contractor continues to utilize disadvantaged businesses at a rate that will exceed its contract goal of 11.3% participation. Next slide. The project is also achieving success in the area of safety. Both the recordable and lost time incident rates continue to trend below the national average. Next slide, please. So we spend every day assessing and managing risk on this project. Those risks associated with construction and other unknown risks are diminishing as work gets closer to being completed. Although construction-related risks are diminishing, they do occasionally pop up unexpectedly. For example, at our last update, I'd shared news of cement and fly ash shortages that were impacting concrete deliveries. Luckily for us, the cement and fly ash shortages were short-lived and did not have a significant impact on the project. And then finally, COVID-19 has not resulted in any adverse cost or schedule impacts to our project. Next slide. So before I move on to recent construction accomplishments, I'd like to share one significant milestone celebrated last quarter, which was delivery of the final light rail vehicle for the project. 36 new vehicles were procured for the Mid-Coast Trolley project, And we were honored to join MTS in October to dedicate the final vehicle to the late Paul Jablonski, who was integral to making this project a reality. Next slide, please. So moving on to construction accomplishments, since our last update, all track has been placed. Construction of the Nobel Drive trolley station parking structure has been progressing and is anticipated to be complete in February. Station construction continues to be a priority for us. Station finishes, canopy structures, all continue to be installed at the stations. And then finally, landscaping, catenary, and track signal work are all in various stages of completion throughout the entire length of the alignment. Next slide, please. So rather than photographs, we thought it might be good to show a short 2.5-minute video showing where we're at this month. So our video starts with the ongoing work at the Old Town Transit Center and Pacific Highway. It transitions to show the new light rail and heavy rail tracks over the San Diego River Bridge. Moving to the Tecolote Station, you can see that many of the elements associated with station finishes have started to be put in place. The next station north, it's a Claremont Station, where less work is being performed because the overall size of the station doesn't allow for multiple activities to be going on at the same time. This shot gives you a clear picture of the overhead catenary work that's been completed along Marina Boulevard. Now, as we fly over the Balboa Station, you can get a very good perspective of what the final station configuration looks like, percent complete. Whereas the Tecolote, in these scenes, you'll notice that there are very little work activities that are underway along the alignment from the Balboa Station all the way north to the Nobel Drive Station, which is a distance of about 4.5 miles. I figure the work in this area is now over 95% complete, but maybe more importantly, as you can see, trolley construction activities in this area no longer impede heavy rail movement as they had in the past. Amtrak, coaster, and freight rail service are now able to operate at higher speeds along this section of track. So now as we rise up from the east side of Interstate 5 at the Southern Overcrossing, we're able to see the status of ongoing work at the Nobel Drive Station and parking structure. The Nobel Drive Station is about 60% complete, while the parking structure is close to being 100% complete. Of note is our intent to open the parking structure to mall use by the end of next month, roughly 9 months prior to the start of trolley operations. The next station is a VA station, and shelter structures are in place and ready to receive roofing, and the yellow deductible warning pavers have been in place. Now, in this panoramic view from just south of the VA hospital, you get a really good perspective of the university and the university community that will benefit from the trolley extension when it's open for use later this year. The Pepper Canyon Station and surrounding area have been a hub of activity for adjacent trolley and university improvements that are actively under construction. Here you can see the significant progress that has been made on and surrounding the Voight Drive Station. And in this final image, you can see the terminus of the extension. But what's really neat here is that it captures the entire length of what we call the UCSD viaduct that extends from the VA hospital all the way to the University Town Center Mall. Next slide, please. Okay, I can't see my presentation. Thank you, Kendall. Through the construction management general contractor model, the contractor for Midcoast Trolley Project, MCTSC, has been able to work with Sandag on several concurrent projects within the corridor. As reported during our September presentation, the San Diego River double track and Elvira to Marina double track projects were both completed in 2020. Additionally, in October, we completed the I-5 Genesee Avenue Auxling project as well. Besides the Midcoast Trolley extension, we are looking forward to the completion of 3 other concurrent projects this year. We are working to complete the installation of the community signage and lighting on the Gilman Drive Bridge. We expect this to be finalized in February. We expect to open the improved Rose Creek Bikeway in April. And last, the Voight Drive Improvements Project is progressing steadily, and we anticipate that will be finished in fall of 2021. Next slide, please. As noted earlier, the Gilman Drive Bridge is the next project to be completed. Although the bridge has been open to traffic for some time, the final piece for completion involved getting approvals for and then installing the UCSD community signage. Now that the signage is nearly complete, the university is planning on an unveiling, boy, that was tough to say, of the lit signage and the uplighting of the bridge structure sometime next month. Next slide, please. So public outreach efforts continue, although processes have been modified due to COVID-19. Unfortunately, construction tours and in-person media events have been postponed because of it. We continue to provide regularly scheduled virtual updates to several community planning groups, as well as to city council staff from the districts directly impacted by project construction. Lastly, opening day planning efforts have commenced as the project nears its anticipated completion late this year. Next slide, please. So what if you or the public wants to know more about the project? Well, we do have a project email address, a hotline number, and a web address as well. And for those that are social media minded, we do have a Facebook and Twitter page and Shift when it comes to UTC specific information. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Ramon, very much. John Haggerty's vacation slides got nothing on your video there, and I appreciate your narration absolutely matching your 2.5 minutes of video. So well done on that too. I was particularly interested when I saw the pictures and video of Pepper Canyon. It was there that with Supervisor Ron Roberts at the time and a federal official, we signed the $1 billion full fund matching document or received it. It was a press event, but we stood in that canyon. I'll remember that, and it didn't look anything like it looks now. And the opportunity that UCSD took with the construction going on in the area to add on to it to create the amphitheater area there. And then when you look at the plus that Caltrans got out of the extra auxiliary lane that's going on in that area, that was a sort of a, hey, while we're here, why don't we do this? Is a testament to the nimbleness of such a big project. And having done one of those tours that are no longer allowed, unfortunately, it was one of the highlights of my service on this committee. And it was really amazing to also hear internally that this project is a model project for the nation in terms of how it's run. And you touched on disadvantaged businesses, and you touched on the on time and on budget, and you touched on, most importantly, the safety. And it's great to hear that COVID hasn't had any negative effects on getting the project done on time and on budget. So I would open it up first to public comments on this particular report on the Midcoast Trolley. Any public comments, Francesca?
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any committee members that would like to get more clarification from Ramon or have comments or questions? Did I hear somebody?
This is Member Sotelo Solis.
Ah, Madam Mayor, please.
Thank you so much. I just want to, you mentioned Pepper Canyon, and I, as a student and an alum of UC San Diego, actually lived in Pepper Canyon Apartments, and where this is, all connecting. I remember it being talk. Oh, we will have a trolley. We will have connectedness from our South Bay communities to the university, and this is just amazing now as a policymaker to see it, to feel it, and I can't wait until, whether it be the virtual lighting to then actually getting post-COVID-19, getting on that, inaugural ride from the border to UCSD, because it's one of those things where when you dream big, you have a team that is willing, and as you said, Chair Sankey, nimble to be able to pivot, to be able to make things happen, and to know, I think even better as us as policymakers, on time and on budget, even better, because we know that the taxpayers appreciate those two words, as do we, because we want to hold ourselves accountable to the highest standards. So Ramon, felicidades, this is amazing. I cannot wait. Congratulations to the entire Sandag team, to Mr. Grata, congratulations. And well, I won't give full congratulations because we want to do the grand opening. But once we get there, I cannot wait. And again, as an alum, this means a lot because also too, it's not just south to north, but it's a north to south connection. So we can start having those dialogues and the connectivity beyond the freeway. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to next call on Supervisor Vargas. Nora, you are my supervisor, and I know we haven't personally met, but I want to A, say hello and thank you. Look forward to working with you, and B, look forward to your comments here this morning.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to being part of this committee. You're not seeing my face because I am working on the super pods and trying to make sure that they're touring all these things. And so, but I wanted to make sure that I was listening and participating. And I just think this is such an important, the Blue Line is such an important piece for our transit system, and for this conversation to be had during my first meeting. I think I'm excited about it, especially for our working families. And as you know, I served on the board of Southwestern College for about 7 years. And so this is really important for our students south of the 8th freeway. They're going to be connected to more opportunities and places in our San Diego region. And so I'm really just want to thank SANDAG staff for working hard to get this project completed on time. And like the mayor said, it's just great that we're on budget, and I'm looking forward to the ribbon cutting and whatever I can do to help support and share the information with my constituents so that they know that we're ready to get them on the Blue Line and get them out of their cars. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Supervisor. And again, welcome to the club. Councilmember Edson, I believe, Jewel, you had some comments on this one.
Yes, thank you, Bill, Vice Chair. I had the great good fortune of being on that tour with you of the Midcoast as it was being created. And I have to say that one of the things I most miss about us gathering at SANDAG on Fridays is driving past that project as it has risen from the ground. And it's just been an incredible experience to see it from day one. And very wish, following up on Mayor Sotelo Solis, yes, congratulations, SANDAG staff, for all of your efforts, because you've done an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules, for your comments. And I'm out of names on my chat list for people to call on. So Francesca, if you'd help me with anybody else who may be in the queue.
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any other hands.
Okay. Thanks very much. And Ramon, thank you very much for your great work. You put John Haggerty to shame. All right, let's, well, yeah, exactly. And John, I was just kidding. Member comments are done. And now we're moving on to item number 12. Very interesting to me, as cross-border is a big part of what I believe and work on, and also do quite regularly. So I'm interested in this particularly personally. So item number 12 was the 2019 Cross-Border Travel Behavior Survey. It's being presented today by Grace Mino from SANDAG and Timothy McClary from True North Research. And we look forward to an informative and concise report. Thank you guys very much. Go ahead.
Good morning, Vice Chair and committee members. Thank you for having us. My name is Grace Mino. I'm a senior research analyst here at SANDAG, co-presenting with Dr. Timothy McClarney from True North Research. Just wanted to let you know that the last time the survey was completed was in 2010. And next slide, please. We just want to go over what information will be presented today. We're just going to go over the reasons of why we conducted the study. We're going to go over the methodology overview, specific key findings, some closing thoughts, and some next steps. Next slide, please. So for the reasons for the study, we collect travel behavior information to update our activity-based model from Mexico residents and people who had visited Mexico returning back from Mexico, and how it impacts our transportation system. The study was also conducted to collect initial information for respondents' willingness to pay the toll for the future State Route 11 Otay Mesa East point of entry. And I want to make a note here that the information that was collected was pre-pandemic. So when the survey was being conducted, it was in late 2019 and then early 2020. We had collected weekday information, and we were about to start the weekend data collection, and then COVID hit. And so we haven't resumed the weekend data collection at this point. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Timothy McClarney, who will go over the methodology overview.
Thank you, Grace, and good morning, Vice Chair and members of the committee. This study was, if you go to the next slide, this study was administered at all 3 ports of entry between Mexico and the United States or within San Diego County. To ensure that the study was representative of northbound crossings, we used detailed crossing data from Customs and Border Protection to develop what's known as a stratified 2-stage cluster sample that was representative of individual crossings across the border in 4 dimensions by the respective ports of entry, time of day, the lane type, so Sentry, Ready, and General, as well as mode of crossings. We spoke with people who were in vehicles, pedestrians, as well as those who were riding transit. Next slide, please. In terms of the methodology, one of the main challenges of this study is that we had to speak with the same respondent at 2 different points in time. So the initial interviews were conducted on the Mexico side of the border. Travelers were intercepted while they waited in the queues. And we did an interview that gathered a variety of information from these individuals, their individual demographics, household level information, what their primary trip purpose was across the border that day, as well as questions about how often they crossed the border. And in particular, as Grace mentioned, it was on that side of that initial interview where we asked about their interest and willingness to pay for future expedited crossings at Otay Mesa East. Now, for qualified individuals, we also then recruited them to participate in a second part, which was the travel diary study, where we were interested in understanding sort of the where, when, why, and how of their travels in the United States that day. This was the tricky part because once we recruited them, we kind of had to let them go, right? And let them do their travels, and they had to come back to us and participate and allow us to retrieve that information. We did that in 3 different ways. Staffed kiosks on the US side of the border, they could come back and work with our staff to retrieve that information. They could do it self-administered through a secure online survey site that we had prepared, and they could also do it by telephone. And it's worth noting that a smaller subset of our total sample also agreed to carry small GPS devices, and that was so that we could validate their travel diaries. Next slide, please. So I'm pleased to report that we were able to over-deliver in terms of data collection. We had set out to do 7,500 initial intercept interviews, and we actually completed about 7,900. We were even more successful on the diaries. The goal was to complete 1,500 travel diaries, and we walked back in the door with over 1,900. So extra data with which to allow us to be even a little more precise in terms of our overall estimates. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the key findings. There is a very long, very detailed report with lots and lots of nuances in the data. Today, we are just going to skip across some of the highlights, sort of cover the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But for those who are interested in more details, that information is available. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with a few slides that focus on US residents who travel into Mexico. And this first slide, we're looking at where they come from originally. So one of the striking patterns you find when you're interviewing people across the border in either direction, that is in most cases, their travels begin and end relatively close to the border. Among US residents who are crossing back into the United States from Mexico, more than half resided within San Diego County. And if you add up San Diego County, Los Angeles County, Riverside County, and Orange County, together they collectively account for about 87% of the US residents that we interviewed crossing back across the border. Next slide, please. Once across the border, US residents tend also not to travel very far. As you can see here, 9 out of 10 of the individuals we spoke with indicated that they had visited Tijuana. If you add up the rest, just 25% of respondents had visited a city other than Tijuana. So they're not typically going beyond Tijuana when they are visiting Mexico. Next slide, please. So in terms of length of stay, the average length of stay for US residents visiting Mexico was 2 days, which is shown on that left bar on the, or that yellow bar on the far left of the slide. That said, The length of stay did certainly vary by their primary trip purpose, ranging from a low of about 0.7 days for those who were crossing primarily for dining and eating experiences, and up to 4.65 days for those whose primary purpose was to go on vacation. Next slide, please. So this slide shows that the primary reasons or purposes why people cross the border were very different for Mexico residents who were crossing to the United States, which is the pie chart on the left, versus US residents who were crossing the border to visit Mexico, which is the pie chart on the right. Among Mexico residents on the left, you see that shopping was the primary purpose. The majority, 52% of individuals said that was their primary purpose for crossing, with an additional 31% doing so for work or business. By comparison, when you look to the right among US residents who cross into Mexico, their primary purpose was to visit a friend or relative, 54%, followed by medical, and at 12%, and shopping at 10%. It's worth noting that on the Mexico side, those patterns, as I'll talk about at the end, are a bit different than what we found in 2010. As a percentage of all trips, work trips were higher this time than they were in 2010. Shopping was a bit lower. Next slide, please. Focusing on US residents again, the study found that those who cross the border do so semi-regularly. In a typical month, US residents reported that they crossed back from Mexico into the United States an average of 4 days. So about once per week, with 3 of those days occurring during weekdays and 1 day on the weekend. And although not shown in this slide, it's worth noting that Mexico residents who cross the United States do so about 3 times as often as US residents going the other way. So whereas US residents are crossing about 1 day per week into Mexico, Mexico residents are reporting that they do so on average about 3 days per week. They're crossing from Mexico into the United States. Next slide, please. Okay, again, once across the border, Mexico residents, this time we're focusing on them, they also tend not to venture very far in their travels. On that table on the left, we asked individuals to tell us where their primary destination was in the United States once they crossed the border that day. And you can see that Chula Vista alone counted for about 43% of primary destinations, followed by San Diego at 30% and San Isidro at about 6%. Collectively, those 3 destinations alone accounted for nearly 80% of all primary trip destinations. If you can, by comparison, if you look at North County cities, you add them all up, they accounted for less than 1% of travelers' primary trip destinations. So a lot of folks, when they're crossing the border in the United States, they're staying pretty close to the border. On the right is a map where we took all of the 5,868 specific destinations that were reported by those crossing from Mexico into the United States, where they visited the United States that day. And you can see that more than 3/4 of those destinations are clustered in 3 South County TSAs, Chula Vista, San Isidro, and Otay Mesa. All right, next slide, please. So Mexico residents typically visit multiple destinations while in the United States. That's the yellow bar represents the number of destinations while they were here, and that averages overall to a little over 3 different stops in the US that day. The blue bars represent the number of hours they spent in the United States, and you can see on average, they're visiting about 3 destinations in a little more than 6 hours in their trip. To the right, we show how that breaks down by port of entry. The number of destinations visited and the amount of time they spent in the United States was a little higher for San Isidro and substantially lower for Tecate. Next slide, please. So in terms of how Mexico residents are getting to their destinations in the United States, driving was the most common mode. You had 44% who drove solo, that's the yellow car there. We had about 30% who were carpooling with or without a surfboard. And then you had about 12% visiting their destinations via bikes, 5% on the trolley, 3% were reached by pedestrian and walking, and about 3% were reached by bus. Next slide, please. So in addition to capturing a lot of detailed information about their travels, we also asked both residents of Mexico and residents of the US about their interest in using the future Otay Mesa East tolled port of entry. And so after describing the location 2 respondents, as shown here on the map in the green. We first simply asked them whether they anticipated that they would occasionally use that toll crossing to get into the United States or cross the border faster for an unspecified fee. So we made it known it was going to be a fee, but we didn't say what it was. And what we found was a lot of interest. You had about 2/3 of respondents say that they expected they would use that tolled crossing at least occasionally for their trips across the border. And it's worth noting that anticipated use, at least on an occasional basis, was very consistent across demographics and trip characteristics. So regardless of whether they are a resident of the United States or Mexico, what their primary trip purpose was, how often they crossed the border, we found about 2/3 interest in all those groups. Next slide, please. So after sort of measuring their general interest, which was I talked about on the last slide, we then got more specific with them, and we asked them whether they, for their trip today, whether they would have chosen to use the Otay Mesa East tolled crossing for a fee of $20, $10, $5, or $3 if they could have shortened their wait time to no more than 20 minutes. So would they be willing to pay to cross at that location, a specified amount, if they could have shortened their wait time to no more than 20 minutes? And you can see that demand is very strongly related to the price tag. At $20, we had about 22% of individuals say that yes, they would pay that fee to have shortened their trip to 20 minutes. At $10, it jumps to 46%. By $5, we have 79%, so nearly 8 out of 10 respondents saying they'd pay $5 to be able to get across the border faster. After that, we don't pick very many up. We're at 86% at $3. And so one of the interesting things about these results is that, you know, they suggest that the toll amount for this future crossing is going to have to be significant, certainly north of that $10 fee amount, to be able to make good on that promise that you can get across in 20 minutes, right? Because the capacity for the new Otay Mesa East border crossing will be limited, and the more people you put over there, the slower it's going to be to cross. And so it suggests that a higher fee is going to be in order to be able to, again, make good on that promise of crossing for 20 minutes. Next slide, please. And so finally, in terms of the results, I show here on this slide a few quick comparisons between the study that we did this cycle in 2019 and how it compares to 2010. You know, when compared to that prior study, we're finding that in 2019, more crossers were employed full-time, and they were more likely to be employed in the United States this time than previously. They were more likely to be crossing for work as their primary purpose, and a bit less likely to be crossing for shopping or visiting a friend. They're spending more time in the United States and visiting more locations in 2019 when compared to 2010. And finally, more of their trips in the US involved dining at some point in 2019 when compared to 2010. So I'm going to hand back to Grace now and go to the next slide, please.
So we just wanted to share some closing thoughts on the possible data implications from this study. Given that more than half of the Mexico residents who cross the border travel to the US to shop, there is economic impacts when there's longer border wait times. Around 1 in 3 Mexico residents that were surveyed came to the US to work. And so, you know, transportation planning implications to get workers to employment centers around the region is high on the list. And after crossing the US, most weekday trips occurred in the South County. So we just want to make sure that a closer look at infrastructure and other investments in this part of the county is not being overlooked. Next slide. So the next steps, again, as I mentioned, the data was collected pre-pandemic, and so we're exploring weekend data collection after travel restrictions are lifted. We did finalize and release the report. It is on the SANDAG website. We also released a SANDAG info bit that was released. Oh, you can't see. It was released today, and it also is a high-level summary of the over 100-page report that is on the website. The data that was collected from the study is also being used to update the cross-border model. SANDAG was awarded a Caltrans planning grant to do an update of our cross-border model component for the activity-based model. So this new data will be used with this model. And then also it's to inform the current traffic and revenue study that's being done for State Route 11. And on February 5th, there will be an update brought to the Transportation Committee to give you an update on the traffic and revenue study for State Route 11. Next slide. And that's our presentation today. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, we'll kick that off with public comment. Francesca, do we have any public input on this particular agenda item?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, so for committee stuff, I'm going to actually kick it off a little bit. I find it particularly enlightening that 2/3 of people are leaning towards using it, and I have a question for you, Doctor, related to that $15 to $20 fee. It's demand management. We've been doing demand management forever, so that shouldn't be all that difficult to get right. It is intriguing to know with the CBX crossing that is obviously related to the airport in Tijuana, how successful that particular infrastructure project has been in terms of breaking all the projected numbers. The footprint on the region is huge, and that other than what you showed us for the car and pedestrian folks that cross, everybody stays pretty close to the border. The passenger demographics for folks that are using CBX to cross into Mexico and take advantage of the airport at Tijuana is much larger footprint for the region, and with many people coming from Orange County, Los Angeles County, Riverside County, to use that particular infrastructure project. And that's interesting. And I don't know how that overlays what's going on at OTAI at the new OTAI East. We've got almost $500 million invested on our side in terms of roadway construction, actually hard pouring concrete, as well as purchasing of right-of-ways and also the land on the U.S. side. And it's particularly encouraging to hear when I talk to Mario Urso about this project that Mexico, the federal government, has committed funds through its particular federal departments to start purchasing land on the Mexican side for this project. And it's been a little bit of a frustration to see us doing so much on our side and not much happening on the other side. But we have it on good authority from our relationships with Mexico, both at the state and federal level, that they are behind this project, want to see it happen, and clearly it will benefit their residents. And that's the they got skin in the game, so it's important for them. The commercial crossing situation with trucks waiting 2 and 3 days to cross is simply unsustainable. Not something that we can bear the economic cost of, because it's something we're planning for, and it's very exciting. The only other thing that really stuck out to me was with 44% of the people driving from Mexico single in their lanes, what kind of demand management project might involve carpooling, working with CBP on dedicated lane that would be for carpools, obviously still with the inspections that are necessary and those kind of things. But in terms of, I mean, if I found out I could go with my friend and save time and money and gas and also contribute to a better environment by a more efficient flow of cars across the border, I'm wondering if at any point carpooling the carpool question might be part of a study going forward, because that just seems like low-hanging fruit. Again, those are my comments to kick it off. I hope there's other folks that have something to say, and it would seem that Councilmember Campillo will be our first, and I'll tee you up. Admiral Bonelli, you'll be next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, and I would thanks to the presenters for showing us this data. I just wanted to make a brief comment that recently appointed the chair of the Economic Development and Intergovernmental Relations Committee here with the City Council, and I'm really looking forward to using this data in formulating policy, because the border region is something we want to emphasize to our constituents in the region, that it is an asset. And we understand that from a cultural perspective, from an economic perspective, we really want to see this become something that everyone enjoys, wants to cross, and commerce flows both directions as well, right? So just thank you very much for this data. We'll be using it. I know that my fellow committee members with Councilmember Vivian Moreno, Councilmember Shanila Rivera, and Councilmember Kate are all very interested in this, and we're eager to work with you on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ro, very much. Go ahead, Admiral Bonelli.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. My question, and I might have missed it in your presentation, Mr. McLarney, being you did this travel behavior survey during calendar year 2019, is the data, how reliable is the data based on the pandemic?
That's a great question. Obviously, we actually finished the weekday patterns in, I believe it was early February, and we were gearing up to do the weekend data to gather some weekend related information related to Otay Mesa East right when COVID hit. And so the good news is we know that the weekday patterns are reflective of pre-pandemic patterns. We know that, right? We don't have our weekend data yet, but I will say that we are part of a team that is doing the traffic and revenue study. And the game plan is we are going to be back in the field in February. We're going back out to collect some additional data. My understanding, and I'm not as close to the, to the actual trip volume differences between when we were doing the study and what's happened since the pandemic, but my understanding is because of some of the restrictions, as you might imagine, they're down, certain types of trips are down. But at some of the ports of entry, we're actually starting to approach the 70 to 80% of volume of where we were before. And so again, the traffic and revenue study that team that we're part of is planning to go out and gather some more updated information during the pandemic here in a couple months. And so we'll be able to then be able to speak to exactly what sort of differences we're seeing. We don't have that second piece yet.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great question, Admiral. Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? No. Okay, well, I'll add one more thing. When you do the weekend study, please, when you add Ensenada and Rosarito as destinations, if you wouldn't mind dropping in Valle de Guadalupe, be interesting to know how many people are using the border to cross for the wine country, as I do.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much for that report. And
Thank you.
Again, I did touch on that carpool issue, Doctor, and if you wouldn't mind saying if there's a way to actually kind of figure that out or
well, I know that. Yeah, so I know that, I mean, when you look actually at the percentage of people who are using carpool to reach the destinations in the US, I mean, it's higher than what we normally see among US residents in terms of their behavior. It's interesting. I think that you will see one of the side effects is just me thinking out loud, but one of the side effects of the Otay Mesa East, because it's a tolled crossing and that price tag is going to be, significant. I imagine that is also going to spur more carpooling on that side, right?
Because some sharing of the cost, exactly.
Yeah, sharing the cost of getting across.
Really good point. That's why you have the PhD. I like that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and any other comments before we close this agenda item? Okay. Thank you all very much. We're going to move on to our last report, and I appreciate everybody's patience as we get here. We'll get through this and get this done. Agenda item 13 is our last one. It is the iCommute Telework pilot, Telework assistance program for employers. Presenting for Sandag today will be Deborah Jones. Deborah, go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Deborah Jones. I'm a Sandag Associate Account Executive for the iCommute program and the lead for its employer program. The Sandag iCommute employer program provides assistance and tools to regional employers to design, implement, and customize commuter programs, and has a recognition program called Diamond Awards. Since the 1990s, the Sandag iCommute program has worked with employers across the San Diego region to reduce traffic on the region's roadways by offering commuter programs that reduce the number of employees driving alone to work. iCommute traditionally focuses on a variety of commute choices: transit, van pools, carpools, biking to work, and teleworking. With the COVID-19 public health crisis and stay-at-home orders, our team has shifted focus entirely to provide telework resources and support services. Now that teleworking has become widely accepted during the COVID-19 pandemic for public health reasons and for business continuity purposes, the iCommute program is initiating a new telework assistance pilot program. Next slide, please. The iCommute Telework Assistance Program provides employers with free hands-on telework program assistance and resources. A recent Sandag survey of 137 local employers showed 26% are interested in continuing with telework 2 to 3 days per week after COVID-19, and with 9% saying that their entire staff will telework. Through the iCommute Telework Assistance Pilot Program, the team assists employers in continuing, enhancing, and formalizing their telework program so that it reduces regional congestion and greenhouse gas emissions overall. The telework target in the 2050 regional plan is 27.5%. Our pilot objective supports this target and aligns with the plan. The target audience is San Diego regional employers interested in developing, enhancing, formalizing their long-term telework or remote working initiatives so as to go from a temporary solution to a formal program or a policy for employers. And just anecdotally, the 5 top reasons why employers offer telework is job satisfaction, productivity, improved work-life balance, helping the environment, and cost savings such as office space leasing. The goal of our pilot is to sign up at least 50 local employers and provide customized assistance through fiscal year 21. And while the team realizes that not all occupations are conducive to teleworking, in the region it's noted that 61% are not conducive, the program will assist employers in determining employee eligibility as well as sharing best practices with the employers that sign up. Next slide, please. As for the format of the pilot, we conducted a thorough review of the most current articles about teleworking, particularly at the time of lockdown and thereafter. We also held 2 focus groups, one with private industry employers and the other with public sector employers. Both sectors are interested in continuing telework in a hybrid modality. Interestingly, the public sector responses about the benefits of telework going forward were not as optimistic as the responses from the public sector. And whereas the public sector employers we spoke with are eager to get back into the office and are starting to make preparations. Lastly, we had a consultant, a telework expert with 20 years of experience, train the iCommute employer outreach team to become experts in the field of telework and to develop a telework training curriculum for the employers. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of what our steps are in the pilot. So we recruit and sign up employers. We have a needs assessment that we do with the employers that sign up. It's very comprehensive, and we try to hone in on what exactly they're trying to achieve with their program. We have an employee survey that they disseminate, and it includes a question about vehicle miles traveled before the pandemic, so we can calculate what the savings are. And then we assign different modules in our training curriculum based on the data inputs that we get. So our program is divided into 5 modules that are customized based on the needs and the goals, the current status, and the key recommendations. And then finally, we have an evaluation and key performance indicators for assessments. Next slide, please. So just briefly, these are our key performance indicators for the pilot. This is my last slide. So there you can see how we're going to be evaluating the different inputs from the pilot, and then we'll decide from those inputs how we want to move forward if we add this to our iCommute employer outreach program. Next slide. So our pilot is open to all employers in the region, including member agencies. So if you know of any employers, we really encourage you to sign up. Our website, iCommuteSD.com, and our telework page has our sign up form and more information about the pilot. I'd like to turn it back to the chair and happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I'm also joined by my colleague, Eva Sanchez from the Mobility and Innovation Department. She's here too, and she's been tracking telework in the region, particularly for the regional planning effort. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for the report. And it's really, I mean, you talk about looking for a silver lining to the COVID how it's inundated so many parts of our lives, but it has moved along by a decade at least. The transformation of our economy to a online shopping, preponderance of online shopping, grocery delivery, all that. And then also you look at telecommuting, the changes in the work habits of folks, especially in the tech areas in Northern California. I have a friend that works for Google, and she spends time in San Diego and in North Carolina, and doesn't anticipate ever being back in the office at least until 2022. And that's what she's hearing from her friends at Google. So it's a fascinating topic, one that I would imagine there's going to be a lot of social engineering studies written and done about this particular time in our lives. And Deborah, to be in the middle of that must be tremendously interesting. Are there any questions from the public or comments from the public on this particular item?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands.
And then Francesca, anybody else on the committee that wants to address this item?
Yes, Councilmember Edson.
Okay, Councilmember Edson.
Thank you. Vice Chair Deborah, could you send me your slides, please?
Absolutely. Yep. Straight away.
Thank you.
Actually, staff, if you make that available to everybody, that would be awesome. And I know our jurisdiction has quite a few teleworking initiatives going, and I'll be speaking to my city manager to make sure that we're getting the most out of our project.
Oh, terrific. Thank you.
Okay, item number 14, Francesca, are there any continued public comments?
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any hands.
All right, first I want to thank you for helping me through this meeting. Our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, February 5th, 2021 at 9 a.m. It is my hope that I will continue to be able to serve on this committee, but as we know, the dominoes and appointments fall in different ways sometimes. So if in fact I'm not going to be with you going forward, I wish sincere thanks to all the staff members and Hassan who've helped make this experience tremendously rewarding for me personally. Serving in a council member in a small city, I never realized how interesting what happened over the bridge and our opportunities to participate in it would be as an elected official, and it really has been rewarding. So with hopes to see you again at that February 15th meeting, I'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting, and I'll adjourn it in honor of Andrew Troxel and his family. Please keep them in your thoughts and prayers, those of you people of faith, and throw a scoop of love their way when you're saying your prayers. So thank you all very much. This meeting's adjourned, and I really appreciate your help and cooperation today.